I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. We're here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast. All right, Steve, good morning. I have been in a rabbit hole of some Sopranos stuff for a while. And we were talking last week about inspiration from celebrities who got their act together. And I was thinking about, like, who are the people who didn't get their act together? And I'm just thinking about this off the top of my head. And I've been going down a rabbit hole reading stories about James Gandolfini. There's your example of people who got addicted and didn't find their way out. Mm-hmm. And some of the things that he did on set when he was hungover or forgot things is he would punch himself in the face and talking himself down. This is my long way around talking about the fourth and the fifth step, because clearly this is a guy who had demons that he could not sort out, no matter what, no matter the fame, the money, the fortune. He just couldn't figure it out. And that came to mind when I heard, he's slapping himself in the face, punching himself in the face. There were those things about why he drank that he never got to. And that's why I thought it was worth talking about fourth and a fifth step. This is not going to be your episode about how you write it down on your legal pad or in your Joe and Charlie workshop. Pretty sure we have other episodes for that. This is more about the why and what's great about it. And I really look at the fourth and fifth step as the therapy steps. Give me your initial thoughts here.
Yeah, it's good to be with you this morning, Matt. We talked a little bit about this at our Monday night meeting this past week. And for me, that fourth and fifth step really was what got me to understand my drinking. Like, I knew I had a drinking problem, right? Mm-hmm. I knew, I talked about it in my story. Like, when I first came in 95, I came in because I drank too much, and I knew I needed to stop drinking. And I was able to do that. I was able to put down the drink and thought that, oh, wow, that's good. I put down the drink, so things should get better for me. Mm-hmm. What I didn't understand was the root cause of my drinking, which is what I uncovered when I had to come back many years later and then do the steps as they were, put in the big book, and we do them in AA, to understand what are some of those root causes, which are those demons that haunt us,
Yes.
They are that's the root cause. I have those demons. They can still haunt me today if I'm not careful, if I'm not doing certain things. And I get the fact I've had many a day. I've never punched myself in the face that I could recall. May have done it when I was too drunk.
I can't even, how does that work?
But I can understand, right? Yep. The old identify, don't compare. I can identify with that feeling so frustrated, so disgusted with myself that I would like to punch myself in the face, right? And the problem is that a lot of these things, and I'm sure it was the same in that case, was things that happen over and over and over again, right? Mm-hmm. The repeat offenders, if you will. And so the fourth and fifth step, number one, helped me uncover those things, right? And we talked about it, and they were life-changing. Those were the steps that changed how I viewed my alcoholism.
In reading these stories about James Gandolfini, he already had a problem before he walked into Sopranos, but it seemed like the demons of Tony Soprano seeped in to James Gandolfini of you can't wear two masks. So going into that role made his life harder. And I look at that into you're growing your resentments and the things that you would put on your fourth step, which made him spiral further, even with the money and the fame. Like with the money and the fame, it almost made it worse because now everything was amplified. I said earlier these were the therapy steps because I had some hard therapy over the past week where we went into some background stuff, some damage, some post-traumatic stress, and kind of reliving it to get it out. I looked at writing down my fourth step as that. So I'll get to some importance here. I'm thinking of a guy that I know that at the time I got sober probably had been in 12-step groups for about 25 years, and he never got to a fourth step. You will be surprised to find out that he never got to a year sober. It was this repeat of over and over and over again. And one of the things that I heard from him is feeling as though he didn't deserve to get sober, which is the importance of that fourth step of not getting past what are the things that are bothering you. Because drinking is nothing more than a symptom of the problem. It's your way to massage the problem. And without having a crutch or something to replace alcohol with, you're just dry. That's why you just can't stop drinking.
Right. Or you're dry and you just can't stop behaving, in my case, alcoholically, right? Mm-hmm. Which is exactly what happened to me. I've talked about it many times here, right? I lost my family during my dry period, right? Not during my drinking period, during my dry period. Mm-hmm. I almost lost another marriage during that time, all during the dry period because I didn't. And here's what I think with James Gandolfini is that he had these problems before he hit that fame, right?
Yep.
And I can identify with this. So you would think, and I shouldn't say I'm sure, but one of the issues may have been he hit that. Sopranos becomes this huge hit, right? This unbelievable hit, and there's probably a part of him that says I should be able to change this now that I have this fame and fortune in this, but yet it was still the problem, right? Yet he couldn't change that at all. And that makes it more frustrating, right? And that makes it more frustrating that you're still doing the behaviors after your life, after in his situation being an actor, you've hit the pinnacle, mm-hmm. right? Like this is it. You've been working your whole life. You've been doing these little things. That's what happens. And again, so for me, it's really about, and you're right, there are therapies. I do describe AA on occasion as group therapy. I do, because I think there's a lot to that, about the fellowship and the meetings and the sharings, and then listen to other people share and taking some knowledge from other people's struggles, right? And really, or other people's solutions, and thinking, oh, maybe I could try that myself. So these are therapy steps, but they're more than that, right? They are more than that. And then, it's really, really important. It was really, really important for me to dig down and figure out the root cause. And I'm not alone. We talk about it all the time. For me, it was fear. It was fear of everything. And I talk about it. It was fear of failure. It was fear of success. Mm-hmm. It was fear of of all my relationships. It was fear of everything. And I had anger, fear-driven anger, right? And that's how I covered up my fear. And when I realized that, it was life-changing for me. Now, didn't change anything at the moment, even when I realized it, right? And that's where, we talk about, that's where the rest of the steps come into play, and they start telling me how I deal with some of these things. But getting that stuff down, really working on it. And not only that, for me, again, we do a big book meeting, so we're able to discuss things like this on a regular basis, right? We're able to bring it back up. It's a constant reminder of why we're here. When we go to that meeting on Monday and we talk about the fourth step, it's a constant reminder of why I keep going to meetings, because, as I like to say, I have character defects that are still with me. Mm-hmm. And they are managed very well for the most part today. But the truth I know for me, the truth is that if I don't continue to manage them, like any other disease, and we talk about alcoholism being a disease, right? Yep. Like any other disease, it's a chronic disease that if I don't manage it, it'll come back and it'll bite me, be it gout. Think about chronic diseases, right? Mm-hmm. Think some of those things like gout, perfect one, right? If you suffer from gout and you don't take care of it by eating rich foods that bring on that thing, that affliction, then you're going to suffer. And if you do everything you can, then you could not eliminate it, but you could probably minimize it. It's the same thing with my alcoholism. Now that I know what the problem is, I know what triggers me, and that's the whole point, right? Fourth and fifth step, and help me figure out what triggers me. And that's what made me drink. When I get triggered, I drink in the past. And today I don't want to do that. So, it really is good stuff.
What do you think makes this scary for some people? There's lots of talk about, this is a terrifying step. What do you think makes it scary for some people?
Well, I think anytime we're gonna dig into our demons, that's scary, right? Anytime that we're gonna really dig into that root, like why do most people, they don't do therapy? Like, who wants to dig up that stuff? Who wants to relive all of that hurtful, bad stuff? It's painful, When I did my fourth step, and I avoided my fourth step for, I don't know, 16 years maybe, right? Mm-hmm. I came in 95. I came back in 2010. Right, that's 15. And by the time I probably got to, so 15 years easily, I avoided doing a fourth step. And I paid dearly for it. I did. I paid dearly. There are no 15. Those 15 years, not all of them, but certainly after a while, became some of the most difficult, destructive years of my life. And there were successes during no time. I don't want to say that there weren't. But when I started to look at the true person of who I was, of how I acted, of how I treated people, it was heartbreaking. Right? I say it all the time. People would see me, and outwardly what a nice guy Steve is. Steve's a nice guy. He helps out. He does this. He does all this stuff. But Steve's motives weren't good. Steve didn't care about. I'm talking myself in the third person. I didn't care about anybody else. Really care about anybody else? I really care. So I think that it's scary for people. And then fourth and fifth step, right? For those who may be unfamiliar, right? Fourth step is to put all your harms down and resentments down on paper, and then the fifth step is to discuss them with another person. And then to think that I have to discuss all those things with another person.
Right.
That can be very scary. Now, again, when I got there after 15 to 16 years, none of that mattered to me. Like, it wasn't scary. Like, I had enough pain and suffering from that behavior that it didn't, like, I was ready. And there was nothing I hid. I mean it. There was nothing I hid. I did everything to the best of my ability. And I was somewhat relieved by doing that. And again, for me, there was no big relief. Some people get this huge relief from doing a fifth step. I didn't have that type of relief, but there was movement. I finally felt like I shed some light on stuff,
right,
that I never thought I would see the light of day.
I didn't have relief. For me, I had accomplishment, because the people I admired who went to 12-step meetings had done this and were advocates of it, and I wanted to be like them. I heard a lot of stories as well from people who didn't do it and had lousy sobriety or went back out drinking. I never heard story about somebody who did a real thorough fourth and fifth step and then had bad sobriety. Those people generally had really good sobriety. So I had a desire to do it, and I wasn't scared. What makes it great is, even if you just go to the big book, there are sort of, in a way, like Excel drop-down menus. You're not doing this just writing down a paragraph. There are ways that there are the things that you could be resentful of. So that helps guide you of how do I do this? It's also helpful to do this with a sponsor because you build a bond with somebody else. If you're doing your fourth step along the way with a sponsor, the fifth step isn't very scary because in many ways you've already gone over this. I'll tell you what also helped me is trying to be as honest as possible in as many meetings as possible.
Right.
Of letting the people around me know how I was doing made the writing process better. And going through it, I had in my mind the idea of what my issues were, but getting them down and seeing all the fear, and especially fear of money, became something I could grasp onto and say, now I understand. And you have that. You also, when those fears creep back up, you can recognize them early.
Right.
That's really helpful. The other thing that's really great is you have this bond with somebody else, another alcoholic. When you share this stuff, for the most part, they've already experienced it or they've heard it before.
Right.
And then you have this feeling of, I'm not abnormal.
Yeah. No, that's a big thing is put your stuff out there. Not only to putting it out there, and again, you don't have to put it out there in all the meetings you go to and stuff like that. That's why it's a one-on-one sponsored thing. But sharing it with, like you said, a couple things there, right? If you do this program properly, by the time you get to the fourth step, you have spent some time with another person, i.e. your sponsor, and you've shared a lot of stuff. And probably a lot of this stuff you've shared, you just haven't put it down on paper, right? As you've probably had these conversations with your sponsor, or maybe even a smaller group of people. So that is an important step. But one of the things I love about, like, one of the things you said is about being honest in meetings is that it starts that process early, right? By opening up, it starts that process. By opening up to people, it's really important. We talk about it all the time about having home groups and stuff like that. And again, this circles back to that a little bit, is that I have two groups that I'm very, very comfortable in. I share pretty openly in all of my meetings, any meetings I go to. But there's certain things I won't share, right? For instance, I go to a men's meeting on Friday night, right? I can, and in that meeting, I mean this completely, I can share whatever I want in that meeting. It's a no holds barred meeting. We share everything to how everybody's going. Now we go to the Monday night, and that's a closed meeting, right? There's different meetings in AA. Go to Monday night, which is an open meeting. I'm much more reluctant to share certain things. Plus, there's a mixed group. There's women there. So, and trust me, when I first came in, I used to share everything, and I realized that there were some inappropriate things I was sharing in mixed meetings, right? I told the story before. I was telling my story, and I was speaking at a meeting once, and I was telling what kind of dick I was to my wife. And I saw a woman who was at that meeting literally tighten up and cringe. And another woman put her arm around her, and I realized I just triggered something in that woman that I'd never want to do again, right? So there's different meetings that I go to and I share differently. And that's why it's important to have those different groups, right? So that you have that home group, or whatever you want to call it, that you could share everything. Our buddy Tim talks about it, right? Our buddy Tim says it the best, I think, of anybody I've ever heard. He says, nobody knows everything about me except one person. And nobody has to know. But one person knows it all. And that was his sponsor, right? And that's fine. That's the way it could be. Like, one person knows it all. So it's really, really important. I mean, listen, there's so many things. This whole program is for me, for you, for the people that we know, for the people that we hang around with. This program's life-changing. And this is a big part of that, right? It's a big part of that. Still work to do, I'm 14 years sober just recently. Still got a lot of work to do. And I don't mean that like I look ahead, oh, I got all this work to do. What I mean is that I just got daily work to do. I got regular work to do. If I want peace and serenity in my life, which is what I strive for these days, I strive for three things these days, and I mean this, and I shared this Friday night. I strive for peace and serenity, and I strive to be useful. I don't strive for happiness and things like that, because those are fleeting, but I strive for those other things. And in order to get those things, peace and serenity, okay, I need to do regular work so that I'm in a place, and that puts me in a place that I could be useful. So that's where the fourth step, and again, that's where we go on. You go on to, you end up with the 10th step, which is basically you got to do a fourth step all the time. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of work, right? We always talk about these are simple steps, but they're not easy steps. They take work. And 4 and 5 take a lot of work. They really do. And you said something there too, is for the most part, people who do very, very thorough 4th and 5th steps have a much better chance of sobriety, of good sobriety.
There are people who I revere in the program, and I try and do what they do. If you see somebody with really good sobriety over a long period of time and they have peace or they're happy, just do what they're doing or ask what they're doing. What's great is you're building bonds with other people. And I would say that most people who come in as alcoholics have low trust. So one of the muscles getting through to step 5 is building trust. You're building trust with a higher power. You may have very little trust there, that there's something greater than you, that you need to control everything. And you probably have very little trust that I need to look inside myself and then share it. Building trust with somebody else is a really important thing. People who are successful in sobriety have built a level of trust with at least somebody, even if it's just the group. And that was something I could recognize. I realized something in myself, which is part of the defect this week, that I've always been apprehensive of getting older. And also thinking of, I haven't accomplished the things that I've wanted to accomplish at this age versus other people. And I had the and also fear of death, and had the revelation that I felt as though I should have fixed these problems by now, that I don't want to die and haven't gone through all the problems I go to therapy for. Now, that's an unrealistic expectation. Nobody has it all figured out. But if you're on that journey and willing, then you're fine. But I just had that realization, and I think it's part of a defect there around I have to be perfect. If I'm going down that road of I have to have figured out the things I go to therapy for, and I no longer have the problems in life that bother me, then I've reached perfection. So I have a perfectionist streak. What is that fear about? And that was a big revelation. And it takes time. 10 years sober. It takes time. I found another one.
Right.
And that's okay. I also had the revelation just thinking here. Many people say the 10th step is a maintenance step. I look at 4 and 5 as practice so you can do a 10th step. It takes a long time to pull out those fears. And if you go through that practice, it's much easier at the end of the day to think, doing that inventory of, okay, how did I do? And what do I need to do to make up those things?
A lot there to unpack there, Matt. It's easy to get caught up in that perfectionism stuff. And I do think that when we do our work, especially 4 and 5, right, we talk about progress, not perfection. And that's one of the most important things. One of the things, and again, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole about it, one of the things that I made complete peace with, and I mean this, and again, this is today, sitting here healthy without any other things going on, is that I have no fear of death, right? Especially, I'm 20 years older than you, whatever. Not quite, but I realize today at this age, and my wife and I talking about it all the time, that I'm way closer to death than anything else. So I made some peace with that. And when I made peace with that, right, that, I'm going to die, everybody's going to die, it actually relieved me of a lot of that pressure, like that pressure that you're talking about, right? That pressure that you're talking about. The other thing I realized is that I've done a pretty good job of changing how I think and feel about most things. Again, far from perfect, right? Far from perfect. And that gives me a lot of relief. It really does. Again, it's one of those things where I used to feel like I was crazy with all that pressure, some of that stuff you're talking about, all that stress, all that pressure. I realized today that I'm just doing the best I can today, right? I'm doing the best I can today. And some days that's all I can ask for, right? I mean that. Some days that's all I can ask for. So, I talk about it all the time. I was at an award ceremony for my daughter when she was in college, and somebody said the most thing that I always remember. I don't know who the guy was, just some speaker on a stage. And he said, Ansel Adams, right, once said that perfection is the enemy of good.
Oh, yes.
Right. And that's what I mean, right? So what does that mean? That means if I'm looking for perfection and if I only accept perfection, then all the good that I do gets lost. And I remember walking away from that, and that was, let me see, my daughter's 31, will be 31 this year, so she was 22. That's almost 10 years ago, 9 years ago, probably. I walked away from, like, that's a beautiful thing to remember. Like, don't beat myself up because I'm not doing it perfectly. And I give myself some leeway. I'm harder on myself when it comes to treating other people poorly, which I still do at times, right? So that's when I beat myself up, but if it's just other stuff, then I give myself a little bit of leeway on it. So, this program, doing that fourth and fifth, and again, that is why we come back, and that is why, like you said, 10th step is a maintenance step. All right, if you do a Joe and Charlie, they're going to tell you it's a growth step, which it can be depending on how you do it. I think what it does is it does what I was saying is that it does the work I need to do on a regular basis in order to keep my peace and serenity, right? I don't do an official, like people who do a really good 10-step, like they do an official 10-step, like they'll think about it, they really work through it. I just sort of do it all the time in my head. What are my motive? What am I doing? What's this? What's that? And sometimes I take action and I fix what's going on, and sometimes I don't. And that's what I mean. So, and the big thing for me is, how am I treating other people? Really, that's what it comes down to for me. How do I treat other people, right? And that's the other thing I've learned is that, I've watched a lot of people die in my day, and it's like I realized, like I'll tell you one thing: I'm not going to be worried about how much money I made, what kind of work I did, if I did this, if I went on that vacation, if I saw that place. I'm gonna be thinking about my relationship with the people closest to me. That's it. What was that like? So that's what I concentrate on these days, right? Those are the things. That's what my fourth and fifth step brought out, was I treated people like shit. And I had to fix that if I want good peace and serenity in my life.
We'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this subject. This is one that terrifies people, but it's also one that people are passionate about. So you have some passion? Email me, Matt@soberfriendspod.com, or on Instagram @soberfriendspod. You can find us on Threads as well. I love Threads, at Sober Friends Pod. Never on Twitter. There's a Facebook site. Somehow I will get the message there, but Facebook is a little bit difficult. But never on Twitter. Don't go there. It's a terrible place. Steve, thanks for talking this out with me today.
Glad to be here, Matt. Thanks for having me.
I hope you have a great week. Bye, everybody. You made it this far into the podcast. That tells me you're a pretty big fan. If you like what we do and you find value in the podcast, consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod. Your donation keeps us on the air to help out the new guy and helps us defray some of our costs. If you find value in our podcast, please consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod.